Hi, this is Dr. Joanne Sarembis, and I would like to review information that's pertinent to Module 2 of our Health Policy and Politics course, and that is understanding the legislative branch of government. As all of you have been choosing your bills, either at the federal or state level, I'd like to first talk about what are the three branches, and then how does legislative branch really fit into all of those. So as per the U.S. Constitution, we have set up one government, but it does have those three branches: the executive branch, the judicial, and also the legislative branch. And there's differences between each of those branches. So let's start with the executive branch. Well, the president signs laws. He can also veto laws. He can pardon people, and you usually see that around an election year or right before he is going out, because I think you have seen this at least in the fall of 2015, and you'll see more in 2016. Appointing federal judges and electing. They're elected every 4 years, both the president and also the vice president. Now in the judicial branch, what they do is they decide if laws are constitutional. They have nothing to do with making the laws. They decide if they're constitutional and if they're being applied in that manner. They are appointed by the president. There are 9 justices, and they can overturn rulings by other judges as well, lower down in the scheme of our judicial system. The legislative branch, they make the laws, and that's what we're looking into right now, looking at bills that in the future may or may not become a law. Approving presidential appointments. They have 2 senators from each state in the House of, for the Senate, and then they have a number of congressmen which are also based on population, and that's in the House of Representatives. Now, there are a system of checks and balances between all of these branches. If you look at the image, you can really see the difference. So going from the executive branch to the judicial branch, well, the president nominates the judges, but then going back from the judicial branch to the legislative, the court can declare presidential acts as being unconstitutional. From the judicial branch to the legislative branch, the court can declare laws unconstitutional. However, the legislative branch going to the judicial branch, the Senate confirms the president's nomination. And then Congress can impeach judges and remove them from the office. And then between the executive and legislative branch, the president can veto congressional legislation so that a bill does not become a law in the final end. Congress, however, approves presidential nominations, and they control the budget. It can pass laws over the president's veto and can impeach the president and remove him or her from office. And so we're going to talk about those, each of those aspects of the legislative branch in more depth. Now, we're going to focus on the United States Congress, and the United States Congress is set up as what we call bicameral. Bicameral means there's 2 separate entities, if you will. So we have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. The House of Representatives sits in one wing of Congress, and the Senate sits in the other wing of Congress. The Senate has 2 members from each state, so it has a total of 100 members. And they sit for 6 years. So they have a term of 6 years. The House has 435. That is the total number of members. Now, the percentage from each state can change based on the population, the percentage of the population in each state, but there can be no more than a total of 435 members of the House of Representatives. They're appointed every 2 years. So you can see the big white number for the House is 435 in that figure, and then we have 100 for the Senate. Each of the 50 states, since 1959, we have 50 states, we have 2 senators representing each state. Now there's two differences, there's differences in the 2 chambers of Congress. And so with the House of Representatives, as I said, the membership represents 435. And now I'm going to go over to the Senate. They represent each state. Okay, so instead of representing a population, the Senate represents each state. And there's a total of 2 from each state. And it's not dependent on size. The fact that the House of Representatives is dependent on the size of the state, the population of the state, was really meant to kind of even out the fact that in the Senate, they get 2 members from each state, no matter what the size. So that is considered a matter not equally of checks and balances, but at least trying to balance the representation. Now, the requirements for being a senator or a member of the House of Representatives differs. So in the House, you have to be 25 or more years old, and you have to have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years. In the Senate, you have to be 30 years old or more, and a citizen of the United States for 9 years. You have to be a resident of the state that you're representing at the time that you're representing that particular state. And again, in the Senate, you have to be a resident of the represented state. We've already talked about the fact that the House of Representatives has a term of 2 years. The Senate has a term of 6 years. Now, the House of Representatives, the members are in touch with their home districts. The members are older in the Senate, and they're more established. Actions in the House of Representatives reflect the changing public opinion. However, in the Senate, actions reflect stable points of view. I mean, let's face it, we have the House of Representatives changing every 2 years, and in the Senate, it's a more stable group of individuals, having a term of 6 years. Now, overall, we have certain congressional duties, and then I'm going to break these up into which chamber of Congress. They can make laws. It is their actions that declare war. So you may have seen this play over time where the president may, whoever that may be at the time, declare war, but it's actually Congress that legally is to declare war, though there are some loopholes for that. They can raise and provide public money and oversee its proper expenditure. They can impeach and also try federal officers. They can approve presidential appointments, approve treaties negotiated by the executive branch, and they have some oversight and investigations that they can also do as part of their duties. Now, there's also this elastic clause, also called the proper clause. And you can see this little man in the figure up in the right. He's a congressman, and he's being held by some elastic. And what that means, this particular clause, it gives Congress the power to also make laws that are necessary and proper in order to carry out their delegated duties. And I'll explain that in a little bit. It's also termed the implied powers, as they are powers that the government exercises but are not specifically mentioned within the Constitution. So, for example, a military draft would be an example of an elastic clause. That occurred in 1940. If you need to go to war and you need to have enough people going and fighting for the country, then you need to have a military draft. So the military draft came into being simply because it was an implied power of Congress when they declare war. There's also the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. Also, we created a national bank back in 1819. If you're going to collect taxes, where then do you put them? So you have to have a national bank. That was an implied power. Creating safety warnings on cigarette packs. It is considered an implied power in 1966. Now, some of these might be questioned by individuals along the way, but these are implied powers, part of the Elastic Clause, that have been granted to Congress. Now, as far as the members of the House of Representatives, what I want to draw your attention to is on this map, which is from the 2010 census. It's every 10 years, as you may recall, that we do a census. And based on that sentence, we reapportion, if you will, the members in the House of Representatives. And so in 2010, in gold, those particular states in the gold color, or kind of brownish color, if you will, they did not lose any members. However, the dark blue, they gained some members. And in the light blue, or if you wanted to call it gray, there was no change of members. Pardon me, I'm hoping I said in the gold, they lost members. Now, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution provides for both the minimum and maximum sizes for the House of Representatives. So that number that I gave you for the House of Representatives, and also the total number also for the Senate. In addition to that, there are also non-voting members, and we call these delegates. There are 5 delegates that represent the District of Columbia, the Virgin Islands, Guam, the American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. A resident commissioner represents Puerto Rico. Again, they can sit through Congress. They can, through the House of Representatives, they can make their individual thoughts on a particular bill known. However, they cannot vote. They do not have voting power. The delegates and the resident commissioner possess the same powers as the other members, just as I said, except they may not vote. Now, the House of Representatives, we have a new Speaker of the House, and that is Paul Ryan. He is third in line of succession to the President. So you have the President, next it would be the Vice President, and next it would be the Speaker of the House, if they were incapacitated or died. They decide the committees that each member in the House of Representatives will serve on, and there's numerous committees. They also decide the order in which bills will be heard on the floor. Exclusive powers of the House of Representatives that the Senate cannot do, they initiate revenue bills. They can also impeach officials, but the interesting thing is they can impeach officials. However, the individuals are tried by the Senate. And they select the president in an electoral college tie. So that is their important job. Now, members of the Senate, as of November 2014, vote. And remember, because instead of being reapportioned, these are 2 members for each state. As of the 2014 vote, we have the Republicans as the majority, and that's what I try to depict in the figure that you have at the bottom, the red being the 54 Republicans, the blue being the 44 Democratic, and then we do have 2 independent members. Now, the terms for the senators are staggered, so that approximately 1/3 of the seats are up for election every 2 years. So think about it, they have a total of 6 years, so every 2 years, a third is going out. That is done for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want all of your vacancies every 6 years, and to have no one present within the Senate who has a history, who knows how things are done, so that the senior senators can help the junior senators. And so the staggering of the terms has been arranged such that both seats from a given state also are not contested in the same general election. So you always have someone, let's say from Pennsylvania, from New Jersey, remaining while maybe the other person, their term is up. Now, the only time is when there's a midterm vacancy needs to be filled, either due to illness, death, or some other reason. Now, on this particular slide, I do have the website to the Senate, and on the previous side, I had the website to the House of Representatives. Now, in the Senate, the President of the Senate is actually the United States Vice President. So right now, it happens to be Joe Biden. He has the authority to preside over the Senate sessions. They used to do this up until about somewhere in the mid-1950s. That used to be their main job. Although they can't vote, they can only vote to break a tie. However, after the 1950s, it was really felt that the job of the Vice President needed to really be more with the President, and so that their daily work did not have to be that as being in charge of the Senate. Additionally, the Vice President usually presides only on ceremonial occasions. So you see them when there's the State of the Union. You'll see the Vice President sitting along with the Speaker of the House. And they have joint sessions of both Congress and also at times to announce the result of significant legislation or nomination. Now, the exclusive powers that the House, the slide should say that the Senate has, and not the House of Representatives, is that they consent to treaties as a precondition to their ratification. They also confirm appointments of cabinet secretaries, federal judges, other federal executive officials, military officials, regulatory officials, ambassadors, and other federal uniformed officers. They conduct a trial of federal officials impeached by the House of Representatives, and also they select the Vice President in an electoral college tie. Now, how a bill becomes a law, you already have a video within Module 2 that really shows this. And it takes you step by step from when the bill is drafted, how it enters either the House or the Senate. It's given the first two letters or letter, so HR for House of Representatives, S for Senate, then it's given a number, and then it's sent to committee or the desk or the calendar, depending on where they feel that it needs to go. Continue to read down this, and you see that it goes to the President, who can either sign or veto the bill. Now, how can you influence policy? We talked about this a bit, actually, within the first module. And just to broaden the scope on that, there are interest groups, there are lobbies, and there's public affairs committees. So an interest group is an organization that really tries to influence the government's programs and policies. The lobby is like an interest group, but they're focused on trying to influence elected officials specifically. Some are paid, some are not. Public Affairs Committee, fundraising organization that tries to influence elections. Okay, so they try to influence elections. Now, these groups may include various combinations of these three factors. Interest groups in the political process perform many functions. They can speak on behalf of members of their particular interest group. They can mobilize other citizens, keep citizens informed about the issues, hold officials accountable, and they can litigate on behalf of the individuals that are part of their interest group. Individuals cannot do these tasks on their own. So time, access to policymakers, and different logistical operations really come into play. As far as advocacy, lobbying, and political activity, advocacy and lobbying are really terms that are sometimes used interchangeably, but they are different. Advocacy is a general term that can be simply supporting a cause or speaking up for something you believe in. Lobbying is a form of policy advocacy. However, it is helpful, and this is for legal reasons, to make a distinction between advocacy, lobbying, and political activity. The Center for Lobbying in the Public Interest defines lobbying as attempts to influence specific legislation through the direct or grassroots communications with legislators or their staff. Lobbying involves advocacy, but advocacy does not always involve lobbying. Now, there's different types of interest groups and lobbyists. The interest groups have a multi-pronged strategy. They influence public opinion, they inform policymakers of their views, and they elect supportive policymakers. Some groups are large enough to have their own lobbyists, and some hire a firm. The groups may team up. They can share data, strategy, and lobbyists. Now, this particular figure in the center of the slide is a systematic factors that create the need for policy advocacy. So in the very center, you have environmental factors that lead to inadequate health care. And in this case, we're talking about policy advocacy, really strictly for health care. Now, you can see the prongs or the arrows going out to different things. So we can start with healthcare organizations such as clinics or hospitals, policies and regulations, community agency groups to our right, policies and regulations that don't work, for instance. Then we have to create the need for policy advocacy. In the social context, looking at health disparities, poverty, issues outside of the public sphere, private insurers and employers. And so all of these begin to affect the environmental factors that lead to inadequate health care. Now, how should you lobby? I love this picture. It does use the word advocacy, but I like the fact that it had lobbying under its umbrella, campaigning, media, and also coalitions. And so, again, as presented before in our first video, personal visits, telephone calls, letter writing, email, social media now really becoming a big part of this. And then maybe providing a hearing testimony. And you may have heard sometimes different members out in Hollywood or in New York will speak to, go before Washington and speak to some efforts that are very near and dear to their heart. Political action committees, they make donations to campaign committees, and they spend on ads independently of the committees. They work on Go TV drives. And in 2012, 55% of donations made to Democrats and Republicans in that election year for the president came from PACs. 45% were from individuals. So 55% of the donations came from PACs, which I think is really interesting. Now, what are some of the current issues in politics today? And which of these really affect health care? So we have universal background checks for gun purchases. That is an issue that's out there. The decriminalization of drug use. Banning Muslim immigrants from entering the U.S., certainly right now a very big issue in this election year. Increasing Social Security age to 68 or 70. Funding Planned Parenthood, Should it be funded? Should it be defunded? Abortion continues to be a healthcare issue. In politics, euthanasia for the terminally ill. Patient protection in the Affordable Care Act. Is it going to exist with the next president? That's the question. Mandatory vaccinations, legalization of marijuana for medicinal use. And we could name many, many more. But these are the current issues that we as nurses really need to be aware of. Now, if you have any questions about this video, please place those questions in the course questions area of the course shell. And thank you for your attention.